everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we're back again, and here now we have another video for you, and this will be a review of the season 3 finale of Superman and Lois. Now there will be spoilers throughout this episode, so just beware, and you can check out my previous coverage of the series on the channel, and I'll leave some links within the description. Now just to recap on the previous episode, we saw the release of Lex Luthor after being wrongfully imprisoned for 17 years. We saw the backstory of his time in prison and his influence despite being behind bars. We see that he has huge desires for vengeance, especially against Lois, and we had that climactic scene where he showed up at Clark's and Lois's doorstep, threatening Lois to retire from her news career. We then see Clark disciplining Jordan for recklessly exposing himself and his powers to the public, and we see Lex returning to Mannheim's experimentation sites and discovering the inverse Bizarro Superman. So we go on to this overall episode then, and overall I do have to say I was very much disappointed and let down by this overall conclusion. For the majority of the time it very much felt more like a mid-episode or an episode during the middle of a season rather than an actual season finale. If we go through the actual story beats, we see Clark and Lois planning a honeymoon in Italy. We see Sam offering John and Natalie a chance to develop some more technology at a D&D base. But the caveat here is that it's in Metropolis, so they will have to move from Smallville. We see that Chrissy is pregnant with Carl's baby, and we see later on throughout the episode Carl proposing to her, which honestly felt a bit sudden. And when we look at all of these storylines, it was a clear indication that the show was clearing the decks following the recent announcement that Season 4 will see the cutting down of characters and cast regulars, as well as a reduced amount of episodes. Now the episode itself had a very slow pace about it, but we knew this was to come very much before the storm, as we would eventually get revelations of Luthor's plans for revenge. And we see this overall as we see Sam Lane being captured after a supposed date, and this is following the narrative that we saw a couple of weeks ago where Sam had decided to very much get back into the dating market. And whilst there was nothing bad about this episode, it did feel like it was spinning its wheels, taking its time, and you were sitting there wondering what exactly is going on, when are we going to see exactly what Luthor is planning. But towards the midpoint, we do see Lex once again controlling and manipulating the Bizarro Superman, killing him again and again to make him overall stronger. And whilst we saw this montage of him developing the Bizarro Superman, I did feel like it was almost as if we needed another episode in between. Like we needed just a bit more development if we were going to build up to some sort of crescendo for this finale. It's almost as if I would have expected Lex to get a clear foundation back in terms of his businesses and enterprises first before seeking out revenge on Superman. We then come to the scene where we see Luthor finally confronting Superman, and we see the emergence of yet again what seemed very much so like a Doomsday variant. And I have to say, this is when the episode really went down for me, as I felt very much disappointment not only in the terms of the choice but also the CGI, and I'm sorry to say it did not look good at all. This Doomsday version that we were seeing on here, we see that he has the reverse symbol of Superman, and whilst I understand that Superman and Lois, whilst having a very big television budget, it is still a television budget, and I just think, why use Doomsday if you don't really have the resources to create a convincing construct of the character? Then why use him at all? So not only from an aesthetic point of view but also from a story point of view. I've said multiple times on this channel that I think in terms of Superman content, Doomsday is one of those overused villains alongside Lex Luthor and also General Zod. Now if you remember at the beginning of season 2, it was hinted that perhaps we would be seeing Doomsday, where we had those early episodes where we saw him in a metallic containment suit that we know most iconically from the comic book storyline The Death of Superman. But in many ways I was relieved that they didn't decide to use Doomsday, because I felt it was too early, and also again that Doomsday is a villain that is overused. So to see him being used here without any real build up just felt very cliched, and I have to be honest, just a bit lazy. And whilst I fully understand that Superman doesn't have the same extensive rogues gallery as both Spider-Man and Batman, I believe he has enough rogues to warrant a full utilisation, especially when you have a show with multiple episodes like Superman and Lois. We look at Smallville, for example, that really went through a whole host of different Superman villains during its run, and I don't see why we couldn't have had the same example here. But we then press on with the overall run of events where we see a battle between Superman and Doomsday. They battle in the air and Superman seemingly impales Doomsday on a city spire. I did wonder why Superman didn't really lift up the body and throw him into outer space, but I guess they had to try and prolong the battle as long as possible. We then see Doomsday get the upper hand on Superman and beating him down before lifting him up into space. And we saw all of the worried faces of the likes of Jordan and Lois, and we see her calling Clark's name out, and this all of a sudden reawakens him, and they continue the battle onto the moon. We then see the fight ensuing once more before we get a very underwhelming climactic end where we see both forces colliding together before the scene cuts to black. So looking at this finale overall, again, I just feel that so much more could have been done with it. We did have the initially very compelling build up in the penultimate episode where we saw Luthor coming back from prison, and there was some interesting questions as to how exactly he would put his plan forward for revenge. But when I look back on it overall, I actually think we could have done with perhaps a trilogy of episodes to further develop Lex's rise to power once more before seeing the climactic fallout for the finale. And I just feel that using Doomsday again, especially when we've seen him used so often throughout Superman content, whether it be through animated movies or series. We did of course see another very poor variant of him in the Zack Snyder Batman vs Superman. And I just think, is that the best that you could have come up with to provide an exciting finale for this episode? So I was just a bit let down overall. Again, on one hand, I do understand that because of the reduced nature of season 4, they kind of had to wrap up all of the arcs of the supporting characters. So I'm guessing that we will very unlikely see Carl and Chrissy will somehow have a jump in time perhaps following the battle against Superman, where we will see certain characters move away. So I'm sure Carl and Chrissy will relocate, and John and Natalie will also go away to Metropolis overall. Maybe season 4 we will see a huge large scale battle before wrapping up all of the character arcs. That's probably how I will see things playing out. Now this is a shame because I do feel that most of the supporting actors do provide very adequate and strong performances, and we've seen that again throughout this season overall. So I'm sure that season 4 with its premiere episode will do its best to wrap up all of their arcs to a satisfactory level. But overall on this finale episode, just very disappointing, not perhaps in terms of the story beats, even though there was a lack of spectacle, but just the overall choice of villain, especially with Doomsday and fighting Superman once more. We've seen this done so many times, and I just wish the creators had a bit more imagination and going for something different. Maybe this was a finale that was changed halfway through, because for so long we were wondering whether Superman and Lois would get cancelled in its third season. So maybe they felt that if it wasn't going to get a full season, that they would go all out with a Doomsday battle, and then when it was renewed, maybe they had to change course quickly going ahead for season 4. I'm not really sure, but I just feel overall this is a finale that, whilst not terrible, certainly was a step down, much like this season I would say, from what we've seen in both previous seasons 1 and 2. So there's my overall thoughts and feelings and review of the season 3 finale of Superman and Lois. Let me know what you think in the comments below. I will shortly be providing an overall season review of this third year of the series, so look out for that shortly within the channel. And if you have any other suggestions regarding any other movies, television series, or any other topics within the entertainment and pop culture scene that you'd like to see me cover, then also let me know within the comments, and I will see if I can provide further commentary for you on that subject matter within the future. Please also hit and like the subscription and notification buttons so I can provide you with more high quality content like this in the future. But that's it for now. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you very, very soon.